I was sitting in the back of a black car heading north on the Pacific Coast Highway when I saw the text. My brother had just asked me for $22,000. His fiancée Megan had picked a venue in Napa Valley, and they were short on the deposit. I didn't hesitate. I opened my banking app, typed in the amount, and hit confirm. $22,000, gone in the time it takes to exhale. The confirmation screen glowed on my phone for maybe 3 seconds before the next message came through. It wasn't a thank you. It was from my mother. She had written it in the family group chat so everyone could see. Wedding update. Bridal party is finalized. Megan's sorority sisters, cousin Laura, and Haley from Derek's office. We're keeping things elegant and tight. No +1s for the ceremony photos either. Claire, honey, we love you, but Derek and Megan think it's best if you enjoy the day as a guest. We don't want any awkwardness in the pictures. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I needed to make sure the cruelty was real. My brother had taken my money for his wedding, and then my mother had announced, publicly, in front of every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the family thread, that I wasn't good enough to stand beside him. Not because of anything I had done, because of how I looked in pictures. Before I tell you how I turned their perfect Napa wedding into the most humiliating day of their lives, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is. I want to know how far this story reaches. I didn't cry. I turned off my phone, leaned my head against the window, and watched the Pacific blur past in shades of slate and silver. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. And in that moment, riding in silence through Malibu in a car that cost more than my brother's annual salary, I realized something I should have understood years ago. I was never their family. I was their margin call. Let me explain. Growing up, my brother Derek was the sun. Everything in our household orbited around him. He played varsity lacrosse. He got into a good business school. He dated girls my mother approved of. And every time he succeeded, it was proof that our parents had done something right. I was the remainder. The thing left over after the equation balanced. I was quiet. I liked computers. I wore oversized hoodies and didn't care about homecoming. My mother, Patricia, once told me at a family barbecue, in front of guests, that I was the reason she started taking anxiety medication. I was 14. I remember standing by the cooler holding a paper plate of potato salad, and every adult at the table laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but the kind of laugh that tells you your pain is entertainment. That was the first time I understood my function in this family. I existed so they could feel better about themselves. But here is the part they never saw coming. The quiet girl in the hoodie grew up. She taught herself to code at 15. She built her first app at 19. And by the time she was 28, she had sold a cybersecurity platform to a defense contractor for $19 million after taxes. I didn't announce it. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I moved into a house on a cliff in Big Sur, drove a 10-year-old Subaru, and kept my mouth shut. My family thought I worked a mid-level tech job that barely covered rent. That was by design, because I had learned early that the only thing more dangerous than being invisible in my family was being valuable. The moment they knew what I had, they would come for it. And they did. They just didn't know it yet. I stared at my mother's message for a long time that night. The $22,000 was already gone. It was sitting in a venue's escrow account in Napa, paying for white peonies and imported table linens so Megan could have her dream wedding. A wedding where I would sit at a back table, alone, watching my brother dance with a bridal party that didn't include me, because my mother thought I'd ruin the aesthetic. I pulled up my bank balance. 1,934万美元. I almost laughed. They had cut me from the photo, but they were standing on my money. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something far worse. I was going to agree. I texted my mother back one word. Understood. Then I closed the family chat and opened a different screen. My real estate agent's number. I had been watching a property in Napa for months. A 1-2-acre vineyard estate with a stone villa, infinity pool, and its own private label winery. It had been on the market for $6.8 million. I called her at 10 p.m. Make the offer, I said. Full asking. Cash. I want to close in 14 days. She paused. Claire, the wedding is in 3 weeks. I know, I said. That's the point. While my mother was busy ordering monogrammed napkins and arguing with florists over shade of ivory versus cream, I was buying the most beautiful property within 4 miles of Derek's wedding venue. And I wasn't buying it to watch from a distance. I was buying it to throw the party they would never forget. I spent the next 2 weeks assembling a guest list, but I didn't pull from my contacts. I pulled from my mother's burn pile. First call, my father's sister, Aunt Rosalie. Patricia had frozen her out 6 years ago after Rosalie went through a bankruptcy following her husband's death. My mother told everyone Rosalie was financially toxic, and that her presence at holidays made people uncomfortable. Rosalie had spent the last 4 Christmases alone in a rented room in Sacramento. When I called her, she didn't recognize my voice at first. "It's Claire," I said. "Pack a bag. I'm sending a car." She was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, very quietly, "Nobody calls me anymore." "I'm calling you now," I said. "And I need you to bring your appetite." Second call. The Newans. They were our neighbors for 11 years until Derek backed into their mailbox with his truck, and my mother threatened to sue them when they asked for $200 to replace it. Patricia spread a rumor that Miss Wynn was stealing packages off porches. They moved to Fresno. They never got an apology. I found their number through a mutual friend. Third call. My college roommate Diane, who my mother once described as not the kind of friend that photographs well at a graduation dinner. Diane had heard it. She never came to another family event again. Fourth call. My father. Yes, my father. My parents divorced when I was 20. He moved to a small apartment in Portland. Patricia told everyone he had abandoned the family. The truth was she had changed the locks while he was at a work conference and filed papers before he landed. He was a good man who had simply been married to a hurricane. He didn't fight for custody because Patricia told him she would make the process so ugly that Derek and I would end up resenting him, so he left quietly. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. When I called, his voice cracked. "Dad," I said, "I'm throwing a party in Napa. I want you there. Will your mother be there?" "She won't be invited," I said. "That's the whole point." By the time I was done, I had 14 guests confirmed. First-class flights for those out of state. A private shuttle from San Francisco International for those flying in. Wardrobes arranged through a personal stylist I had hired for the weekend. I wasn't just hosting a dinner. I was staging a resurrection for every person my mother had buried. The day of Derek's wedding arrived under a perfect California sky. 74 degrees, no wind, the valley golden and still. I knew because I was standing on my own terrace 4 miles away, overlooking rows of grapevines that now belonged to me. My guests were arriving. Aunt Rosalie stepped out of the shuttle first, and I barely recognized her. The stylist had done extraordinary work. The woman my mother had called washed up and pathetic was wearing a tailored navy dress and pearl earrings. Her silver hair swept back. She looked like she owned the vineyard. She looked like she owned the valley. I walked over and handed her a glass of wine from my own cellar, a 2019 reserve that the previous owner had left behind. Her hand trembled slightly as she took it. "Claire," she whispered, looking out over the estate, "how did you do all of this?" "I just stopped asking for permission," I said. The table was set on the terrace overlooking the vineyard. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, arrangements of lavender and wild rosemary cut from the garden that morning. We served rack of lamb, wood-fired salmon, roasted vegetables from the estate's own garden, and 3 wines paired by a sommelier I had flown in from Sonoma. My father sat at the far end of the table, talking to Mrs. Nguyen about her garden in Fresno. Diane was laughing so hard at something Rosalie said that she knocked over her water glass. Nobody cared. Nobody performed. For the first time in my life, I was sitting at a table where no one was keeping score. I had hired a professional photographer and a drone operator for the afternoon, not for vanity, for evidence. The drone rose above the estate and swept over the pool, the vineyard, the terrace, and the long table of people my mother had thrown away, all of them glowing in the late afternoon Napa light, raising their glasses. I posted the first photo at 4:47 p.m., exactly during the cocktail hour of Derek's wedding 4 miles away. I chose a shot of my father and Rosalie clinking glasses, the vineyard stretching out behind them like a painting. The caption took me 10 minutes to write. It had to be surgical. Some families are built, some are bought. Today I'm with the ones who showed up when no one was watching. To the people 4 miles away spending $22,000 of my money on a party I wasn't allowed to stand up at. I hope the photos turn out great. Ours certainly did. I tagged Aunt Rosalie. I tagged Diane. I tagged my father. Then I put my phone face down on the stone table and picked up my wine. The sun was setting behind the western hills, turning the sky amber and rose. I didn't check for notifications. I didn't need to. The first call came 11 minutes later, then the second, then a flood. My phone vibrated so steadily against the stone that my father looked over and asked if I was getting an earthquake alert. I flipped the phone over. 31 missed calls in 45 minutes. Derek, Patricia, Megan, Patricia again, Derek again, a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Megan's mother. I let them all go to voicemail. At 6:15 p.m., Curiosity won. I played the messages on speaker, letting the sound carry across the terrace. My guest deserved to hear this. The first voicemail was from Patricia. Her voice was controlled, the way it always was when she was performing calm for an audience. "Claire, I don't know what you think you're doing. but your Aunt Rosalie just posted a photo with your father and tagged our entire family. Megan's mother is asking questions. You need to take this down immediately. This is Derek's day. Don't be selfish. I skipped ahead 9 minutes. The composure was gone. You vindictive little brat. Do you know what you've done? The wedding coordinator just showed Megan your post and she is crying. Crying, Claire. On her wedding day. Is that what you wanted? You've always been jealous of your brother. Always. Delete it now or I will call my lawyer Monday morning, and I will make your life very, very difficult. Then Derek's voice. He was trying to whisper, but the fury bled through. Claire, what the hell? Megan's mom thinks we're broke because of your caption. She's asking why you paid for the venue. You need to fix this right now. I'm not kidding. Call me back. I set the phone down. Rosalie looked at me with wide eyes. They really don't know, do they? She said. They never bothered to find out, I said. We finished dinner as the stars came out. We drank more wine. My father told a story about teaching me to ride a bike when I was 6, and how I refused to let him hold the seat because I said I'd rather fall than be held up by someone who might let go. Everyone laughed, and for a second, his eyes got glassy, and he looked away toward the vineyard. I pretended not to notice. At 10:30 p.m., headlights appeared at the bottom of the driveway. My security system sent the alert directly to my phone. 2 vehicles, a white SUV and a black sedan. They stopped at the gate. I checked the camera feed on my tablet. Derek was driving the SUV, still in his tuxedo, the bow tie hanging loose around his neck. Patricia was in the passenger seat of the sedan behind him. Megan was not with them. I assumed she was back at the reception, or what was left of it. Derek got out and walked up to the gate. He didn't bang on it. He pressed the intercom button and spoke with a voice I had never heard from him before. Flat, dangerous, and exhausted. Open the gate, Claire. I pressed the response button from the terrace. No, this isn't a game. Open the gate. You're on private property, Derek. My private property. 12 acres of it. There was a pause. I could see him on the camera looking back at the sedan where Patricia was sitting with the window down watching. Mom wants to talk to you, he said. She had 31 chances to talk to me tonight, I said. She used every one of them to threaten me. I'm done talking. That was when Patricia got out of the sedan. She walked up to the gate in her mother-of-the-groom dress, sage green and floor-length, now wrinkled from the drive. Her heels sank into the gravel. She gripped the iron bars. Clarinet Whitmore, you open this gate right now. You have embarrassed this family for the last time. I raised you. I fed you. I kept a roof over your head. You also told a table of adults that I gave you anxiety when I was 14, I said. You cut Dad out of our lives because he was inconvenient. You told the Newans they were trash. You told Rosalie she was financially toxic. And tonight, you used my $22,000 to throw a wedding you wouldn't let me participate in. I'm not your daughter, Patricia. I'm your donor. And the donation window is closed. She didn't flinch. She reached through the bars, holding a folded document. Derek spoke with a lawyer this afternoon, she said. Megan's uncle is an attorney. He looked at the family trust agreement you signed when you turned 19, the one your grandfather set up. Any assets developed using family resources, including the internet, housing, and mentorship provided during your formative years, are subject to redistribution under the trust's equity clause. That cybersecurity company you sold? You built the prototype in our basement, on our internet, with the education we paid for. She unfolded the paper and pressed it against the bars. We're not asking for everything, she said. Just what's fair. 40%. Sign this, and we all walk away clean. Derek stepped forward. It's a reasonable offer, Claire. You should take it. I looked at the document through the gate. I recognized the trust agreement. My grandfather had created it decades ago as a symbolic gesture, a family values statement with no legal enforcement mechanism. Any first-year law student could have told them it had the binding power of a greeting card, but they hadn't consulted a real attorney. They had consulted Megan's uncle after 4 glasses of champagne at a reception that was falling apart. I could have laughed. Instead, I let the silence stretch. You mentioned the $22,000, I said finally. You sent it voluntarily, Derek said quickly. I did, I said. But did you read the memo line? He blinked. I didn't wire that money to you, Derek. I wired it to the venue directly. I called them 2 weeks ago and changed the payment terms. The deposit you thought you made? That was my money. The venue contract is in my name. Patricia's face went slack. I own the reservation, I said. The caterer, the florist, the band, they were all paid through a production company I set up. Every vendor at your wedding tonight invoiced through me. I'm not a guest you excluded, Derek. I'm the underwriter. And as of tomorrow morning, I'm canceling every outstanding payment. The florist, the photographer, the late-night dessert bar, the after-party DJ, none of them have been paid in full yet. They will be, but only if I authorize the release. Derek grabbed the gate. You can't do that. I already did it once today, I said, when I wired the money in the first place. The difference is, now you know who's holding the checkbook. That's extortion, Patricia hissed. No, I said. Extortion is showing up at someone's gate at 10:30 at night with a fake legal document demanding 40% of their net worth. What I'm doing is called leverage. And I learned it from watching you. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to drive back to the reception. You're going to smile for the rest of Megan's evening because, unlike you, I don't want to ruin a bride's wedding day. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Aunt Rosalie and apologize. You're going to call the Newins and apologize. You're going to call Dad and tell him the truth about why he left. And you're going to do all of that not because I'm forcing you, but because the alternative is that every vendor files a lien. The venue charges a cancellation penalty against your name since you co-signed the original inquiry, and Megan's family finds out that the entire wedding was bankrolled by the sister you cut from the photos. You wouldn't, Derek whispered. I bought a $6.8 million estate in 14 days to make a point, I said. Ask yourself if there's anything I wouldn't do. Nobody moved. The only sound was crickets, and the faint clink of wine glasses from the terrace above, where my guests were still laughing, unaware of the scene at the gate. Patricia straightened. Fine, she said, and her voice was brittle as dry wood. But this isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. That's the part you haven't understood yet. They got back in their vehicles. Derek's tires spun on the gravel as he reversed. Patricia sat in the sedan for a full minute before her driver pulled away. I watched the taillights disappear down the vineyard road until the darkness swallowed them completely. I stood at the gate alone for a while. The night air smelled like wild sage and cooling earth. I could hear the fountain near the main entrance, the water steady and patient, the way I had learned to be. I walked back up the driveway, past the olive trees, past the pool glowing turquoise in the dark, back to the table where my father was pouring Rosalie another glass of wine. He looked up as I sat down. Everything okay? He asked. Everything is exactly where it should be, I said. Later, after the last guest had gone to bed in one of the villa's guest rooms, I walked through the vineyard alone. The moon was high and full, lighting the rows of grapevines like silver corridors stretching toward the mountains. I thought about the girl at the kitchen cooler, holding a paper plate, watching the adults laugh at her expense. I thought about how she had learned to make herself small so she wouldn't take up space. I wished I could go back and tell her something. Not that it would get better. Not that she would get rich. Just that one day, she would own the table. And when she did, she would fill every seat with people who deserved to be there. I didn't lose a family that night. I just stopped pretending I'd ever had one. And standing in my vineyard, barefoot in the warm dirt, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in 31 years. I felt like enough.